Sure. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the IWFM Sustainability COP26 event. You're all very welcome here today. And on behalf of the IWFM Ireland Committee, I'd also like to welcome our moderator, our guests, and of course you, the attendees as well. I suppose originally we had intended that this would be a physical networking event, but obviously COVID got the better of us yet again in this instance. Just to give you some background, we have been working tirelessly in the background over the last kind of 12 months, further developing a vision and strategy for IWFM Ireland specifically. And we intend to roll that out in a lot more detail. So we will become far more visible in 2022. So part of our ambitions there is to kind of, increase the learning and network opportunities, opportunities to make a real change in what we do. And I suppose the purpose of this event is actually to kind of promote obviously sustainability and, how we can impact that. So the challenge obviously is looking to meet global, European and the Irish targets, such as reducing and removing greenhouse gas emissions and carbon reduction, etc. But it's also about improving the resilience of each organization and the portfolio and the infrastructure that's associated with that. But also bear in mind that there are kind of systems and processes such as ISO standards and EN standards that help support each of these, and even new standards actually being developed at the moment for sustainability in FM. I'd like everybody kind of to consider how each of us can become a facility management champion within our own organization, and that's not just kind of a moral or professional obligation, but more of an opportunity, in fact, where we can be seen as real leaders and not just driving it in within facility management, but across the entire organization, and how we integrate that with our other colleagues and stakeholders within each organization. The outline of today will be Matt Kennedy is going to give an introduction of himself and a brief overview of kind of COP26 and the outcomes of that. There'll also be a panel discussion for about 50 minutes, after which we'll have a question and answer session, and I'll do some closing out remarks at the end. Just dotted in between each of that also, we're going to have some polling, and we'll ask you to kind of vote as you see those polls being presented. So on that note, I'd like to hand over to my colleague and friend, Matt Kennedy, Climate Services Leader for European Region within Arup. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks very much, Conor, and it's a pleasure to be here moderating today. This is a really timely event around sustainability, COP26, and its impact on the workplace. Before I introduce the speakers, I just wanted to really frame what we're hoping that the audience will come away with. So from my perspective, I was at COP. I lead the climate and carbon team within Arup Ireland. And going back a few years, I was the EU negotiator at the COP in Paris that agreed the Paris Agreement in 2015. So I come from a lens of technology transfer, but really what we're hoping today that everyone will come away with is a deeper understanding of the issues that were discussed at COP and how that can influence in some of the decisions around the government targets in the coming years. And it's been a very rich year for government, from new climate action plans, carbon budgets, and now how those things will translate into Ireland's share in terms of effort and its contribution to the European Union in terms of its national determined contribution. We're hoping also to touch on how the built environment professionals can contribute to sustainable practices in workplace design and building operations. And in many ways, it's a call to action around sharing best practices. So we have a really strong panel. But before I touch on the panel, I thought what might be useful to do would be to just introduce a little the some of, from my perspective, the outcomes from COP. So the COP can be seen, depending on your lens, from being either quite positive or quite negative. I think what it has really done, it has highlighted and acknowledged the importance of the Intergovernmental Panel and the importance of science in terms of evidence leading decision making. It is also, for the first time ever, it is in its language, it's referred to fossil fuels. It's referred to the idea of phasing down fossil, and it is also referred to the reduction and elimination eventually of fossil fuel subsidies. It has called on what's determined as the less ambitious countries to develop more concrete plans, or NDCs, in the coming year, because generally there is an emissions gap. So we can see that we're on, based on all the commitments that have been made before Glasgow and at Glasgow, we're on a pathway that's possibly somewhere between 1.9 degrees and 2.4 degrees. And there is a significant emissions gap to be reduced. And that's when we talk about decarbonization, we talk about resilience. All of these things are really important in terms of reducing that gap. One of the main outcomes seen as being a mechanism for carbon trading and markets and more transparency. And I think that that's really important. If you think from an EU perspective, we get to link our emissions trading schemes together with like-minded schemes, and it enables financial flows to happen in terms of the market. There's been many, many different announcements, many of which will impact in terms of the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management, from more finance being allocated to mitigation actions, to greater focus, not just on greenhouse gases such as CO2, but more methane, more private sector financial alliance for net zero being put in place, clear movements away from fossil fuels, clear movements away towards ending coal-fired power plant, great investment happening in terms of pledges to protect nature and sustainable agriculture. So all of these are clear announcements, some of them binding, some of them non-binding as part of the pledge. But let's just, from my perspective, talk on the observations really. This was high-level political event. It shows where climate sustainability is now featuring in terms of not only in our lens on a daily basis in our workplace, but also in the evening basis in our own homes. You can see that there was a large political and business leader attendance. This isn't just an avenue for government anymore. Business leaders, Bill Gates, Bezos, everyone was there talking about how they need to invest more in climate action. We're seeing very clearly investment in terms of planning, in terms of setting of targets. But from a key observation from my side is that the private sector now is playing a key role in a fora that didn't really exist before, which was certainly government driven. The G20, the large economies, are now focused on climate action and sustainability, and that focus from the G20 meeting earlier in the year translated itself. And the media are playing a great role. You can see this is the first time ever that the BBC covered the plenary of COP26. So there's been great attention over the last number of weeks, and now really the focus from my perspective is on how we can translate some of that into a discussion in terms of its impact on the workplace. So as I move to introduce the panel, I'm just going to go around. We have a very rich panel, as I mentioned, and let me begin by asking everyone individually to introduce themselves and their affiliation. And maybe, Eileen, I can begin with yourself as the Head of Sustainability in RTE. You're on mute, Eileen, I think.
Thank you, Matt. I'd just like to say it's a great privilege for me to be here today. I'm the Sustainability Manager for RTE, the national broadcaster. RTE takes extremely seriously, and has done for many years, its environmental impact and its sustainability, and its principles are enshrined in its environmental policy and its energy policy. So it's lovely to have the opportunity here today to collaborate with you all in our shared challenge.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Leslie Kelly, can I ask you to introduce yourself from Unispace as well?
Sure, thank you, Matt. So hi everyone, my name is Leslie Kelly. I am the studio leader and design principal for Unispace here in Ireland. Unispace are a commercial architecture and construction company, and I'm an architect by background, so I spent the last 15 or 20 years working alongside clients to really define their sustainability credentials. And I've worked in many, I guess, BREEAM and LEED accredited schemes over the last few years. So looking forward to input into the conversation today, some of the changes that we're seeing off the back of COP26.
Thanks, Leslie. And Paul Prendergast from Coates, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name's Paul Prendergast. I'm the Global Environmental Lead with Coates. Coates are a FTSE 250 organization. We're the largest industrial thread manufacturer in the world. We make products from threads that go into your clothes and into your footwear, from that to zips, and also performance materials. So you'll see our threads. They're rather ubiquitous in airbags, in cars, in seats, and so on. And I'm delighted to be here to tell you about our sustainability strategy and what we're doing at Coates. Thank you.
Super, Paul. Thank you. And Claire from Sodexo. Thanks.
Yeah, morning. So Claire Atkins-Morris, Director Corporate Responsibility for Sodexo covering UK and Ireland. So who are Sodexo? We're a global outsourcing company. We work both with public and private clients to design, deliver and support core business operations. In the UK and Ireland, we employ approximately 30,000 colleagues, delivering services from food and catering, facilities management, property, technical services, and so on and so forth. Those on the call who are FM professionals know the breadth of the FM market. In terms of the sectors, corporate, prisons, universities, schools, again, very diverse, and our focus not only on net zero, but our social value and the core to how we operate is that we achieve value, better outcomes and improve the quality of life for both the people and the communities that we serve.
Super, thank you, Claire. And finally, over to you, Dervla, for an introduction in terms of SEAI.
Good morning, Matt, and thanks very much to the IWFM for having me along. I'm delighted to be here, honoured to be invited. So my role is Programme Manager for Business and Industry with the SEAI, or the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. So the SEAI, our role is to help Ireland to move towards a low carbon energy future. So we do that by supporting all parts of society to use less energy and to transition to cleaner forms of energy. So we provide supports to businesses, homeowners, schools, public bodies, communities, through a range of educational, financial supports, grants, etc. I'm a mechanical engineer myself, chartered mechanical engineer, so I worked in building services for a long time. So I'm well aware of the opportunities and the challenges in the built environment sector.
That's great, Dervla. Thank you. So you can see certainly there's a rich panel. It's diverse, different sectors, but all talking about the impact of sustainability in terms of the workplace. Before I go into the questions, maybe a couple of little bits of housekeeping. There is going to be a Q&A session, so feel free to add to the chat. I'd also, sorry, I've skipped over Ken. Ken, my apologies. Feel free to introduce yourself. Ken Gormley.
Easy forget, Matt. Thanks very much. No problem at all. Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here, and thanks for the invitation from the Institute of Workplace and Facility Management. My name is Ken Gorney. I'm the Chief Estates Officer and Energy Officer for the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, which is a health sciences institution in Dublin, in the top 200 times higher ranking recently, and #1 in the world in well-being, which is one of the SDG goals, which we're very proud of here in the college. I'm very passionate about sustainability and everything to do with environmental and sustainability policy. Over the last number of years, I've kind of grabbed the sustainability element of the university and have tried to drive it forward, from developing a sustainability policy to introducing an energy and a sustainability work plan, which we hold the senior management team's feet to the fire on. So yeah, really delighted to be speaking to you all this morning, and thanks very much again for the invite. Thanks, Matt.
Super, Ken. Thanks very much for joining. It's great to bring the perspective from the Royal College to this morning's event. I was mentioning a little in terms of housekeeping, so there is a mechanism for chat. We'll have a Q&A session towards the end, so feel free to post your questions. And also, we're going to be doing a number of different polls throughout the session over the next 40 minutes or so, where we'll be asking people to rank certain questions in terms of their priorities. But let's begin. This is in many ways a kind of an informal, so everyone sit back and relax. What we're going to do is talk about your own businesses and areas that have great interest to yourselves. So maybe I'll begin with you, Eileen, and open it beyond yourself. But in terms of understanding the sustainability focus areas of where someone like RTE sees sustainability from a short-term perspective or even longer term, and where you're placing your focus in terms of sustainability.
Okay. Well, RTE doesn't produce tangible products. Obviously, we make programs. So our environmental impact, because of our size and the numbers of people and the size of the site, is very diverse. But the way we focus our attention is we have assessed our impacts. And in dealing with these impacts, they break down really into three areas: operations, production, and content. And our strategy going forward is geared to efficiency and best practice, elimination of waste. And when I say elimination of waste, I mean waste prevention. So we're looking at how we do things in order to remove a waste process completely, so it doesn't become a residual waste. We have ISO 50001, which is an energy standard, which is recognised internationally. We're the first broadcaster in Ireland and in the UK to hold ISO 50001. So we're very privileged to have a fantastic energy team within RTE. And I think most of our decisions and our opportunities in context of energy can come from that framework. And that's one of the things I would advocate, really, would be the audits and standards. So I suppose our challenge is the same as everyone else's. And I would see, I know from some of our regional areas down the country that it's difficult to do certain jobs in small buildings as it is in big buildings. So the challenge is the same for everybody, and I recognise that. So hopefully that gives an overview of the challenges we have in RTE.
Oh, it certainly does, Eileen. Thank you. And I might pose the same question to Ken. Ken, being the College of Surgeons itself, maybe focusing on the sustainability focus for the college over the coming decade, even if you take your lens to the short term and the medium term perspective. Is there any opinions you'd like to share?
Sure thing, Matt.
view?
Yeah, it's we have a different type of challenge than outlined by Aileen there. It's the building we're in is hundreds of years old, so it falls under a conservation order, a large portion of it. So anything we try to do, we have to involve the conservation officer. So we try not to let that hamstring us, because obviously we've got a very large campus, not only in Ireland but across the world, and we also take Bahrain into consideration with our environmental and sustainability goals. So, for example, when you're talking about the short term there, Matt, a project that's just about to get off the ground in January in Bahrain is over 3,000 PV panels are going to be installed to grab that fantastic sunlight that you have out in the Middle East, and particularly in Bahrain, and provide 6 megawatts of energy to the campus. And that's going to take a severe amount of pressure off the local Bahraini grid. Locally in Ireland, and what's our challenges? Our challenge is our customer base, which is our students, are young people that are very much tuned into the environmental and sustainability environment and what's going on, all very disappointed with COP, and really drive myself and the engineering and the estates team and the senior management team here in the university to do the right thing. And I think they've been a real catalyst. As I said, about 4 years ago, I grabbed the sustainability and environmental nettle here in the university and started the process where we really had nothing. And it was the students that really demanded that from the institution. And they've really helped us develop in the areas outside of the normal engineering that I could talk about for hours and bore everybody on energy procurement contracts and CHP plants and reducing our carbon footprint, which is all very, very important. And I think you have to start at the beginning and not greenwash and all that kind of good stuff, planting trees up in Leitrim to offset your carbon footprint. We all have a responsibility as building owners. So what the students have driven us on that maybe we wouldn't have been thinking about was the areas of biodiversity, the areas about the impact in our community, the areas of poverty, and in relation to our workforce. And I'm sure I can speak for everybody on the call here that we call upon our partners in the facilities management and the estates management game, where we would have colleagues coming in from other organizations through cleaning, security and catering. And our students are very well tuned in to these frontline and front-facing staff that interact with the students on a daily basis where I may not. So a cleaner, a security officer and a catering assistant, and the value that they deliver to the organization. Our students are insisting now that we make sure that all those staff are cared for as if they're our own staff. So that's around the living wage and possibly taking people out of the work and poverty. So we've looked at sustainability and environmental through the SDG Accords and the wider lens. We can't impact them all, but we've picked a number for, we're number 6, 7, 13, 11 and 3 in the SDG Accord. We're really focusing on them, Matt. And I think what's really vital to our organization is we've realized that sustainability environment is now core to our business, and it's core to our student base, who are our customers, and we must embed ourselves in that. So hopefully that gives you a flavor of what we're doing in the college, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely it does, Ken, thanks. And I would have thought that water would be a significant challenge in Bahrain. Not just, I'm sure it's full of sun, but I'd say there's very little water and there's scarcity there from a SDG side.
Well, for sure, and one of the challenges around the PV is cleaning PV. But what we've done is a very innovative model in that, where we take water from the sea and we desalinate the water, and we get the pH values right, that we can use that for cleaning the PV. Because it would be somewhat ironic that we would use a very scarce resource to clean panels that's creating energy, one might say, from a resource that Bahrain has got lots of, which is a fossil fuel. But I think we've been very mindful of that.
Great, yeah. What I might just do is move on a step, which is really open up the conversation around accomplishments, because organizations talk about what they're going to do. They talk about sustainability in terms of future targets. And I'd like to really bring in Leslie from Unispace and Claire from Sodexo here, just to talk about, is there something that you want to frame that is one of the better accomplishments that you've had in the last year? So maybe Leslie, if you want to share an accomplishment, and then maybe we'll move to Claire.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Matt. I think just before I get into that, I would definitely agree with Ken, some of the comments that you've just been making about, how students and I guess the younger generation, with the variety of companies that we are working with, are really driving this sustainability change. So it's not only coming from, I guess, board level down in terms of all the executives within the company, it's also coming from all the employees and all the colleagues up. Because we're seeing, over this last year, 18 months, the workplace design has fundamentally changed. In terms of sustainability, yes, and the kind of influences and drive of COP26, but also through COVID, And, you know, people want different things from their workplaces now these days. They're seeing, you know, really the importance of some of the points that we're talking about earlier, really connection and collaboration and bringing people together. And the importance of community. So it's really making sure that we are responding to all of those elements. To your point, Matt, about accomplishments over this last year, I think one of the key things, and since COP26, is the importance of sustainability and how it has actually moved up the agenda. So previously, when we were working on projects 5-10 years ago, you know, you got to all the remainder of your points, and somewhere at the bottom, sustainability was there. It was somewhat of a tick box exercise, whether it was BREEAM or LEED or whatever requirements. Whereas now it's really front and foremost of the conversation, and that really involves getting everyone around the table from a very early door and making sure that all the right stakeholders are involved. So I think that's been a really interesting change over the last year. I think, you know, that's great and fundamental that some of these things are making such meaningful changes throughout large amount of companies. But then it's also, you bring it back to people, and it's small things like on a local basis where we're replenishing a new workplace. If you can make small impacts like recycling carpet tiles, we've heard one story where we've taken carpet tiles from one of our buildings that we are repurposing, and they were able to be used in a community centre somewhere else in the country. Like there's just a, you know, you can do all these global things, but it's also some of the small people stories on a local basis that make such a big difference, I think, to colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely, Leslie. I think we've heard it now a couple of times. This reference to repurposing or circularity, it's becoming more mainstream, I guess, in terms of our narrative, and it's certainly something that we in ARP are considering in terms of the built environment also. Maybe over to you, Claire, from a Sodexo perspective in terms of an accomplishment from a sustainability perspective in the last year or so.
Yeah, sure. So I think those on the call would know that net zero, whilst it's a new term, it's actually not very new in terms of sustainability. So a number of the companies on the call, and Sodexo included, we've been on this journey for some time. So we've been looking at our carbon emissions since 2010. We've pulled in the support of WWF to help us to understand the different scopes. And I think this is something that we need to be really mindful of around language and the different scopes. We have a net zero commitment, which we're really proud of, and I'm sure we'll have time to expand on that. But in terms of achievements for us for this year, so firstly, we set out to reduce our carbon emissions by 34% by 2025. The baseline was 2017, so we set that way before net zero, and that was already following a 1.5 degree trajectory. Now we've met that already this year. So well ahead of our original target, and that's not only due to the impact of COVID. We worked with our group resources to also confirm that the intensity of that reduction was there as well. And in part, that's across a reduction across all three scopes, but it also demonstrates the importance of the build up to COP26 and how it impacts on companies such as FM, because a lot of our carbon emissions sits within scope 3. So 99% of our emissions sits within scope 3, which is emissions that we don't necessarily control. And because the government has really focused on decarbonising the grid, that's impacted on our ability to meet some of these targets that when we first set them felt really ambitious. But now, because we've met that target, it's enabled us to be really bold and brave in terms of our future commitment, which is actually really focusing on decarbonisation of 90% of our business across all three scopes, rather than offsetting. So that's led to that ambition. The other kind of accomplishment for us is around food waste. So disappointingly at COP26, we didn't see the link between carbon and food system and food waste. And so we're really showcasing food waste, and we've been deploying a technology called Wastewatch, which monitors and measures food waste and drives behavioural change. And yes, we've been impacted a bit by the pandemic in terms of deployment, but pleased to report that we've saved 280 tonnes of food waste since we've been deploying, which is equivalent around 500,000 meals and around 2,000 metric tonnes of carbon emissions. So we've now got an acceleration project ahead to move that forwards. But it's really great to sort of have these commitments, but also demonstrate the accomplishments of those commitments.
Yeah, Claire, that's really impressive. I'm always intrigued that organizations that are looking at scope 3, because it's there's a tendency, certainly in Ireland, to focus on 1 and 2 and think that scope 3 is someone else's scope 1, so let's not worry about it. But the narrative now is turning around what we can not only control, but what we can influence also. And what I will come back to around these net zero commitments, and in terms of the actions that you're doing and the measurements that you're doing to show that you are actually performing quite well. But so I'll come back to that in a second. What I may ask Cormac now, I think we have a point where we have a poll that we're going to present to those participants online. And maybe if they just want to take a few seconds to let me read it, or what do you think should have the main responsibility, or who do you think should have the main responsibility for tackling climate change? Please select only one. Of course, that's yeah, it's a great question. So the lens of the audience might reflect a particular perspective, but if you could vote now, that would be great. And great, and then we'll just move on. Thank you very much. So let's move a little now on to how the conversation over the last period of time has changed a little, especially around sustainability. And maybe, Paul, might be a natural time to bring you in. And then what I also want to do is bring Derval into this conversation too, maybe bringing 2 different perspectives from 2 different sectors. Paul, do you mind sharing your views and how you see sustainability and how it has changed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, sure. I've been working in this area for over 25 years. You know, the first environmental legislation was drafted back in the 70s, the decade I was born. And it's changed, you know, but beyond comparison. If I speak to the company, you know, I currently work in, similar to Claire at Sodexo, we've been looking at sustainability issues for many years, but we didn't actually publish our first standalone sustainability report until 2019, which is just a couple of years ago. Sustainability was always part of our corporate annual report. Now we have a standalone sustainability report. I think there has to be a process where a company decides what issues are the most important to them, otherwise known as a materiality assessment. We look at that every 2 years. We look at over 60 different sustainability issues to see where they rank in relevance to our stakeholders, which of course are our customers, our employees, our shareholders, the environment, local communities and suppliers, and of course in relevance to the delivery of our commercial goals. We are, after all, a manufacturing company, and most of those issues now fall into the environmental and social areas. So we're talking about water, we're talking about emissions of our effluents, our wastewater effluents, energy waste, circularity. And if you look at the social issues, modern slavery, forced labor, we operate in mainly developing and third world countries. So those issues are still thankfully not at Coates, but they are in the industry. So we've come up with a total of 7 different targets for our sustainability strategy. We've got a baseline year of 2018, again, similar to Sodexo, with whose baseline year is 2017. Our target is 2022, and they're massively ambitious targets. There's a 40% reduction in water used, and that's relative water used to our kilograms of thread that we produce. 7% reduction in energy. We're going to discharge no hazardous chemicals to the environment in our wastewater effluent. and we are reducing our waste by 25%. Now, all of those were targets we had set back in 2018 that we published in our 2019 Sustainability Annual Report. But you know, Matt, as you point out, the world has changed even in the last couple of years. So in the last 2 years, we've added new targets post our 2022 strategy, that we're going to, by 2030, have none of our products made from oil extracted materials, and by 2030 we'll have 70% of our global energy consumption come from renewable energies, from renewables. 2050 is the target for us to be net zero. So it's massively changed. It's gone from no sustainability report to net zero by 2050.
That's great, Paul. And they're challenging areas, and I guess your sector is highly under the lens from a sustainability perspective. Is there more focus now on your value chain, your scope 3 emissions, and how you can actually work with your collaborators to reduce those emissions?
Yeah, it's very appropriate for us because we have just compiled our first scope 3 carbon footprint this year, and the reason we did that, we've been tracking scopes 1 and 2 like everyone has for many years. But our scope 3 carbon footprint is really where our environmental impacts are. It's the supply chain, it's the agricultural land use, for example, in our fiber production, which predominantly comes from plastics and cotton. But we have produced our first scope 3 carbon footprint, and the reason we did that, well, first of all, is obviously to lower our environmental and sustainability impact, but also because we've joined the Science Based Targets program. So we are part of that. You know, we are using 2019 as our baseline year for the Science Based Targets, and now, you know, I've described our targets, which are energy, waste, water, and so on. Now the view is going to be focused purely on our carbon emissions, and most of those are going to be from our scope 3 carbon footprint. So it's very timely. We've just joined the Science Based Targets program, and yeah, scope 3 is one of the key things that our board discusses on a regular basis.
Super, thanks. I think we're ready to share. That's great, Paul. And I'm going to touch on the science-based stuff again, because a lot of organizations haven't moved yet to a temperature alignment. I think we're going to share some of the results from the poll, maybe come up on screen. So you can see that the government, again, they're the ones who have the responsibility. And this is a nice segue. Industry have a significant role, though, to play, it seems, as well as individuals. So I would have always said that the role of the Environment Organization is to remind the government that they have such responsibilities. So, but certainly that's an interesting response for sure. In terms, it's a mix of government and business and industry, and it's a natural segue into Dervla. You know, so. Dervla, even though you're coming from the public sector in terms of SEAI, you engage a lot with industry. So you know, you have your fingers on the pulse in terms of where industry are going in terms, and how has SEAI seen a change in sustainability over the last number of years, and how are industry reflecting that back to yourselves as well?
Well, I think one of the biggest changes recently, or in recent years, was really the switch from, why sustainability was important to how we embrace it. I guess previously there might have been people who questioned the importance of it, or the costs, whether it was beneficial. And I think now, the science is clear. There's irrefutable evidence that we need to embrace sustainability to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So the focus has moved very much towards how we will do that. So the actions that need to be taken and the choices we have to make. So I guess that's very much at the core of what SEAI do, providing supports, to businesses. You mentioned businesses there, and what we are finding is that where previously businesses might have looked at reducing their energy use as a cost saving measure, it's much broader than that now. So businesses recognize the opportunities, I guess, from a customer point of view. You know, their customers are demanding and expecting that they reduce their climate impact. So they you know, they're looking to retain staff as well. I think Ken mentioned that, you know, that students are very, you know, it's very much priority for them. And if you're looking to recruit staff, retain staff, you really need to have a focus on sustainability as a business. And also it's just, you know, I think we've all seen in the last 2 years how a global shock like COVID can impact on businesses. And they recognize that they need to be prepared to be resilient to the shock that is climate change. So I suppose that's what we're seeing from businesses, and we're very much seeing businesses wanting to take action in a tangible, transparent way. There is greenwashing out there certainly, but I think the businesses that we deal with at the SEI are very much focused on reducing their emissions, reducing their energy use specifically.
Yeah, Derval, and is it are their main drivers competitiveness, or is it just to be more responsible? Or is it share price? Like, what do you think the drivers are from a business side?
It's well, I suppose certainly competitiveness. You know, the increasing costs and the volatility of the cost of energy is an issue, and also from a customer point of view, you will be left behind, I guess, if you don't demonstrate that you're reducing, or you're at least targeting reduction in your climate impact. But also, you know, a lot of large companies and public sector bodies now are embedding sustainability and climate action into their procurement processes. So if you don't take action, you just simply won't be able to access those markets. And as well as that, I suppose that the businesses that take action will benefit from that. You know, they will be, you know, they will be on shortlists. I think I heard recently that Tesco have advised their suppliers that by 2024, I think they will have to have a grasp on their scope 1 and 2 emissions at least, and that's quite significant, particularly for small businesses. You know, getting a handle on your scope 1 and 2 emissions, really understanding your energy use, understanding how to reduce it is quite a challenge for businesses, and that's where we're trying to help them.
Yeah, thanks, Derval. Yeah, I've noticed it in terms of procurement, especially more in the UK than in Ireland, where public sector tendering has requested those to present things like climate action plans, sustainability criteria, and how they can respond to them as part of the tendering. So even to get on a framework or get on a panel and show you have energy product declaration or environmental product declarations, etc. So I think the procurement can only get more deeper from a sustainability perspective. Would that be fair to say? Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see that ourselves now over the coming years in the public sector in Ireland as well, with green procurement and the requirements in tender documents will need to be set out. That's super. Thanks for that. I think we're going to just have another poll now for those participants. If we want to put it up on screen. So please look at the following list of environmental issues and select the 3 that concern you the most. So I'll give you a few seconds to have a look, but it goes from air pollution to flooding to congestion to the Earth's resources and overpopulation. So we're touching on a lot of the SDGs themselves here. So if you can narrow it to 3, that would be great. Thank you. And just as people are answering that poll and answering those questions, I want to bring attention really to, we've introduced the idea of commitments in terms of companies. And maybe I can bring Eileen back into the conversation. I know Claire talked about the carbon neutral and net zero from a Sodexo perspective. But Eileen, from the RTE perspective, what are the commitments that are being made? Do you have plans running to the 2030-2040 trajectory?
Yes, we do. We have numerous commitments. We have about 4 different types of commitments. Some of them are obligations, but a lot of them are signed up to by our Director General. We have a content pledge, which we have recently signed up to with other broadcasters in the UK. We have a carbon pledge with business in the community. We also hold a Business Working Responsibly mark, which is geared to ISO 26000. And we have all of our procurement staff have gone on training for public procurement, and human rights and all the issues about sustainability are factored into our procurement criteria. But as part of our business in the community carbon pledge, we have committed to a reduction of 50% carbon intensity by 2030. And we have done an analysis of our scope 3 as well. And we are at the point where now, with that information, we are in a position using the greenhouse protocol as the standard to assess what reductions and what action we need to take within RTE to achieve the reductions that meet our commitments of reducing by 50%. So that's where we're at the moment.
That's great. I mean, the reductions, it seems to be getting more burdensome. You know, as an organization wants to become more responsible, you set up pledges and you're aligning now to science-based targets under business in the community. You're looking at your scope 3. It's quite a lot of effort here, and net zero doesn't come cheaply. It comes with significant cost. Would that be fair to say?
Well, I think that just based on some of what's coming down the line from our government in the context of sustainability, I think it's going to be unsustainable for any business not to do things properly. I think I went to a seminar about 5 or 6 years ago, and someone said, and it's come true, that unsustainable business will not survive because of the size of the number of the usage of the resources on the planet. By 2050, we will need the resources of 3 planets if we don't do something. So unsustainability, businesses who go down that track will not survive. The other thing that we've taken very seriously is our content. We have committed to a content pledge, which involves what we actually put on air, and making sure that we optimize the message about sustainability in that, and we do sustainable production as well. And we have RTE was worked with other broadcasters in Ireland, and we actually managed to bring, as part of a broadcast coalition, to bring the Albert calculator to Ireland. Now, the Albert calculator is a tool which measures the sustainability of a program, how a program is made. And we have had programs now that we're using the calculator on, and we're trying to increase that so as that effectively we want all our programs to be using the carbon calculator and measuring and being able to use under N-board. This was a sustainable production. So that's really one of our targets.
That's great. You can see, those type of scorecards featuring now under different sectors. It's interesting. I haven't heard of that calculator before, which is great. And it's great to see RTE being really proactive in this area. I think we're coming up with the results now of the last poll. So if we want to put them up on screen. Now, you can see climate change, which of course is maybe multi-technology, multi-sectoral leading the way here. But there's actually the pollution features quite heavily, and waste management. So you can see water waste featuring and using the Earth's resources. So yeah, it's quite a nice spread. It may represent the diversity of the audience as well in terms of the sectors that they're representing. Let me pick up, and thanks for sharing that perspective, Eileen. Thanks. Let me pick up that same question really around commitments and maybe open it up a little. I know, Paul, you talked about commitments around, but have you any concerns, Paul, around making such commitments, or should you be focusing on particular SDGs? Just if you want to touch on that for a second, maybe the challenge of such commitments or the concerns with commitments.
Yeah, sure. You know, our existing sustainability strategy to the end of 2022, as I said, that focuses primarily on water, energy, or wastewater, effluent, and waste. And of course, they touch on sustainability, SDG numbers 6, 7, 13, 12, 3, 5, and 8, for anyone who knows what those SDGs are off by heart. So you know, they are ambitious targets that we've set ourselves for 2022. But I'm delighted to report, as of today, I'm looking at our global sustainability platform that we've created specifically for this purpose, that shows us exactly where we are in real time. We're actually meeting our 2021 target by 6% in water, and our energy target by 2%. So we're well on the way to meeting those 2022 targets. But as you say, Matt, that there are challenges, you know, and most notably for us, that's our raw materials. It's things like silicon, which we use as a lubricant in our finishing process. It's really the cost of raw materials. Another massive issue is working out of water stressed regions. So we need, like any manufacturing company, quite a lot of water, a lot of energy, which is why we've got such ambitious targets. And you know, over the last couple of years or longer, we've been looking at not just where we're operating in terms of bottom line, but also where we're operating in terms of water stressed regions, because we don't want to impact on the water availability for our local communities that we operate in. So that's actually a top priority for us, looking at how stressed the region is in terms of water and whether or not we can actually operate there from a sustainability perspective. But when you look at science-based targets, we have, you know, we're aiming for well below 2. We're aiming for less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's got massive implications in terms of all of our operations. It means in reality, we've got to go to at least 70% renewable energy by 2030. It means we've got to be zero liquid discharge for our wastewater effluent in quite a number of our sites, and I'm happy to report we've done that in quite a few of our sites already. But yeah, you know, these commitments do not come cheaply, but we're invested.
They don't come cheaply.
And the planet's more important than how much they cost.
That's right, Paul. It's a time-based investment at the moment. Can I bring in Leslie also to talk about the Unispace commitments and any challenges you might have in terms of delivering upon them? Leslie, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, as a business, you know, we have a number of elements that kind of are considered. We have our strategy and design part of the business, and then we also have our delivery. And obviously, a lot, I guess, the key, carbon user would be our delivery side of the business. So we deliver globally across 40 different countries. And we're seeing a variety of, targets and goals coming from various countries that we work across, whether it's UK and Ireland or elsewhere in Europe or, Australia or even America. And I guess it's trying to ensure that when we are delivering schemes that we're taking into consideration all of the appropriate factors. So trying to source the right materials and kind of local materials that we can, ensure that our footprint is carefully managed is one of the key things. So it's really managing that, the delivery sector would be the key thing for us, Matt.
Absolutely. Materials is something core to my business as well, and understanding the embodied carbon within them.
Yeah, and I think there also is going to be, an increasing drive towards, we obviously see that concrete and steel, being such a carbon intensive materials, there is much more of a drive, I believe, over the coming years to actually reuse some of the existing buildings that we have, so that we're not, constructing new out of the ground. If there are opportunities to really reuse and repurpose some of those existing structures, I think that is much more coming to the forefront, because obviously if we've got a carbon budget to try and target, that is much more efficient for us in terms of general strategy.
Yeah, and do you see deeper kind of life cycle analysis being more mainstream in trying to understand not only how you repurpose at the end, but actually how you consider all the inputs at the start?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's very much coming more and more to the forefront. So, we're not just looking at the design, we're looking at the full life cycle of the buildings. So, the energy consumption in use, generally, how they're getting their energy. And also what, at the end of the project, thinking about the demolition strategy and how that can be recycled and repurposed is moving much more up the agenda.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Leslie. There's a chance now for another polling question, just as we move into a discussion around COP26 and measured disappointment, I guess. But so in question 3, how committed is your business organization about tackling climate change? So you've got 4 options there. Just to select one would be great. Thank you. So there has been reference to COP26. I want to bring in Claire. Claire, you did mention your commitments from Sodexo. You mentioned maybe disappointment around food waste at COP26. Can you talk about what maybe your feelings were in advance of COP26 and what your feelings were post COP26, and maybe frame it in the lens of Sodexo? Thanks.
Yeah, so I had the great opportunity to attend COP26 over the course of the 2 weeks, and there was definitely a real difference over the 2 weeks. So the first week, I think everyone was very excited. There was a real sort of party atmosphere, I think partly because a number of people hadn't been able to get out and about first. So there was very much an excitement, we're really going to set the tone here. It's a real opportunity. Lots of member states were participating. Fantastic event for Glasgow, although I did really feel for the Glasgow people as well. And I had to definitely thank the people of Glasgow for such a warm welcome. They were fantastic. Those first 2 days really set a great tone in terms of the deforestation and the methane, and everyone felt that it was going to be, a really positive experience. And then when I was there for the second week, you could start to feel the fatigue setting in, and maybe some frustration within that as well, in terms of, are we, and Matt, you were saying you had that negotiating job in the past, and I really felt for the negotiators, because they had such a tough job to do, and you could see that it needed to end on Friday. It didn't. It obviously rolled over until the Saturday to really sort of drive through some of those tangibles. So I still think COP26 is a real positive event. I think it was really positive for the UK. It was really positive for Alex Sharman. He's still got the presidency now up until COP27, and a real opportunity to demonstrate. Again, lots of talking. Let's now start demonstrating the actions. So when we move into COP27 in Egypt next year, let's make sure the agenda is really reflective. Let's make sure that the NDCs are ready to be further discussed. Let's build on the further discussions that were had around the Paris Agreement, so that moving into COP27, it's in a much better place. And we've already started lobbying the government to ensure that food waste and food systems is part of that core formal agenda, because it just felt so lost. It was a real focus on scope 1 and 2, which is very reflective where industry is. I get that. But then when we start looking at actual true impact, scope 3, 99% of our organization sits in scope 3. So we can do scope 1 and 2. It's still not easy. We can absolutely share that journey, but scope 3, that's where we have to work collaboratively. That's where we need the government policy. That's where we need to work with government and other businesses and NGOs and think tanks, because that's how we make a difference. So For me, I still think it's positive. I did a paper for Sodexo to say this is what COP26 means for Sodexo, because I think you need that step change and articulation, because otherwise it just feels like, oh, that's COP26, but what does it mean for me? So if those on the call have a chance to look at the papers that have been shared, try and think about articulating what it means for your organisation, and then share that with the colleagues that work for your organisation to really set the tone, so they feel that COP26 is tangible to them rather than something that just happens on a yearly basis.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Claire. There is a translation piece required, because people don't resonate. Well, the articles, they don't resonate. Yes. The UN language doesn't resonate with industry. People need to understand, well, if there's investment being made, what does this mean? Does it mean, maybe more investment in decarbonization that might impact in terms of assets? Some of those might be stranded. Suddenly industry are beginning to become awake that of how a particular message translates itself, or decision translates itself. That's great. I think we have the results actually from the last poll on the screen. So we are the leaders. We have measurable public commitments. So this is, this is about taking ownership, I guess, which is great, rather than being kind of a passenger, I guess, which is really important in terms of a finding. I want to maybe bring in Ken a little, because I know that the college has numerous buildings. We could see the youth and education very heavily critical of COP26 and the outcome. Has that filtered all through the university, and is there just general disappointment, or what's your feeling? Representing every young person in Ireland right now, Ken, what's your...
Yeah, it's a good one, Matt. I have my personal opinion on that, and then I've my business head opinion on it. I'll start with my personal opinion. I think, and this may be very controversial to everybody listening and everybody in the room, I don't mean to be, but I think our young people sometimes need to step back and realize that they're probably the greatest users of technology, of energy, of any generation that there's been over the last, hundreds of years, I guess, but that's just the development of technology. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about in the university, working through the many societies, we have a green campus, which I think we have 6 or 7 students sitting on the green campus, which is fantastic. Our students can very quickly bring us, and I guess young people in general, can very quickly look beyond the basic. And so, for example, in the university, Ken, why don't we have a wind farm like they've up in Dundalk IT? There's a big wind farm in the middle of the campus. And why do we not have a windmill? And why are we not doing, more in biodiversity? And why are we not doing more in what one might see as the next stage of what we need to do in sustainability, while all being relevant? While they won't use a keep cup and they won't do the recycling correctly, and they can be quite wasteful with food, etc. So that's just a premise on in relation to your question, Matt. So I am conflicted sometimes. I think the young people are fantastic. They drive us forward, but on occasions they can be some of the worst polluters and some of the heaviest users of energy, etc. And along with adults. So I think there's a bit of a management thing there. I think they look towards Greta Thunberg as being this oracle around the way forward on sustainability and everything that needs to be done. And while Greta has a great voice, I think we need to remember that she is a 15 or 16-year-old teenager, and we all have quite different immature views when we're that age, and we can look back through the rear view mirror on that. But with that said, I think our students are exasperated with COP26. I think the language I've heard around the college has been a lot of virtue signaling by senior leaders in countries. Obviously, great disappointment that the Chinese really didn't turn up to COP26, and I know a lot of our students would feel, how can we as a as a global environment, a world, so to speak. How can we get on top of sustainability when some of the biggest players in the production of CO2 emissions and pollution, et cetera, weren't around the table to make their commitments? So I think the young people are exasperated around that, but it has to be tempered with, youthful exuberance, that they, sometimes other elements of what's going on in the wider sphere of the geopolitical environment we all live in gets dragged in to the sustainability debate as well. Well, it maybe should not be directly in there. So I think they are exasperated. I think in relation to the university, they're very happy in what we're doing because they're driving that agenda. So we have environmental societies who have been fantastic over the last 24 months, particularly during COVID lockdown, in getting our students' well-being into some sort of control, where students have felt that they've been isolated in apartments on their own across Ireland, across Dublin in particular. And we've been doing beach cleans. We've been out in the community with the repurposing that some of the other speakers have spoken about. So we've been doing the old recycling of the clothes and bringing them out into the communities. Doing grinds with the local schools here, and our students getting out and helping with that. So I think our students, on one hand, yes, very much disappointed with COP26, but at the same time, very happy with what our own institution is doing and what they see locally being driven forward. I hope that answers your question, Matt.
Yeah, no, it does. It's a broad church. That's the challenge in terms of COP, because I know that the youth delegation, this has been the most successful for them because they've been knocking on the door for years, and there was over, I think, 40,000 or a little more submissions made from youth organizations to the UNFCCC, and now some of them have positions on some UN boards, which is seen as being a success, or at least a change. It's a challenging area. I know academia were very critical of the COP process because they feel excluded. They feel that non-parties are further away from the discussion than they've ever been before. Let me, there's another poll to go up for those who are in attending and participating online. But while I wait for the poll question to be put on the screen, I have, and this is a real around sustainable issues to address in your work. What are the main, and that might be a cross representation of the organizations, but from carbon to water, waste, health. Let's talk a little bit about legislation. And Dervin, I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, representing government, albeit the agency itself, but it has been really rich. There's a lot of confusion around carbon budgeting and how that will translate itself into measurement and action. From an SEAI perspective, you've been very, I suppose, vocal in terms of the requirements to decarbonize transport, electricity, heat, in terms of buildings, and working with building owners and facility owners and industry. Where are the best opportunities there? We've been very strong in renewable electricity, so we can park that part. But what about heat and transport? Where are the opportunities there, I guess?
Yeah, so obviously decarbonizing heat is, for businesses, it's a big issue for society. I think the opportunities there are around certainly transitioning away from fossil fuels to electric heating. So by that I mean our renewables. So for example, heat pumps. So there is a commitment in the Climate Action Plan around 500,000 heat pumps by 2030. And that will go a long way to reducing our reliance on natural gas and oil for heating. There's also, targets around district heating. So we already have, we're looking at district heating in Tala, using waste heat basically from the likes of data centres or waste to energy plants, for example, in Ringsend. Ireland has been a bit of a laggard, I guess, in terms of district heating. If you look at Europe, and that's something that will has been covered or is covered in the Climate Action Plan. for transport, I mean, there's very much a focus on electric vehicles. Obviously, you know, 1 million electric vehicles by 2030 on our roads. But I think it needs to be a more holistic view of how we get around. You know, looking at sustainable modes of transport. You know, the required. Do we really need to get into our car to make that journey, 2-kilometer journey up the road? You know, can we walk? Can we cycle? Providing sustainable transport to people and sustainable transport options. Now, it's a lot more difficult if you're living in rural areas. I don't suggest people can carpool, but certainly for, you know, for the bulk of people working in or living in our cities and towns, large towns, sustainable transport options will have to be provided, and I think there's a recognition of that as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Can I touch on a little about the heating bit, because I know you mentioned heat pumps, and I guess in new build it's a perfect good solution to get you to the high B. Or what about facilities owners? What about these commercial buildings that are guzzling quite a lot? What are the heating options there, and what should facility management entities and commercial organizations be thinking of from a heat perspective?
Well, I think first of all, I think it was Eileen talked a lot about waste, and there's already a lot of wasted energy or energy efficiency opportunities, we'd like to call them, from the point of view of heating, not just heating, but electricity also in business, in facilities and buildings. So that's the first opportunity, and there could be potentially up to 10 or even 20% of reductions available there through energy efficiency means. And that's you know, really, it's not sexy. It's, you know, it's not like slapping solar PV on your roof to demonstrate your credentials. It's much more about understanding your energy use, understanding where, you know, what you're heating. Are your thermostats set at the right temperature? Do you have sufficient and appropriate heating controls on your buildings? So I think that's the first opportunity. But secondly, heat pumps are a solution for commercial properties. And I think it's something that you know, there hasn't been a lot of them to date, but there are much larger heat pumps coming on the market, and there's developments in heat pump technology where you have 2 or even 3-stage heat pumps now being used to generate high temperature heating. So and even steam. There's hybrid or electric boilers that can produce steam as well. So there are, you know, the technology is there. It may not be fully proven, but it's rapidly developing, and I think we'll see the costs coming down as well, similar to how solar PV has in recent years. Yeah, that's great, Dervla. It's great to share some of those options that are open to the building owners and facility management. Can I? We're coming towards the end. If the audience, if anyone wants to post any questions, feel free to do so. Just as a reminder, and just as there's around 5 minutes left, I might lead to the last or one from last poll question. If you want to just put that up on the screen. So they're the answers from a carbon energy perspective. A clear winner. It probably reflects where the policy push is being placed at the moment. It would have been great to see more circularity feature, but I suppose it fits in under the carbon dimension. And if you want to post the next question, which is the most important thing workplace managers can do to prevent climate change. So the facility managers, and this is a question really I wouldn't mind asking the panelists, and maybe if I can touch on Eileen, you for a second. I know you expressed a great interest around circularity. How can the facility managers, or how can we influence our workplaces in terms of when we design them from a sustainability or a circular economy view in mind? So what should we be considering? I'll open this question. We're coming towards the end. I'll open it to whoever wants to respond, but this is for Eileen first. Thanks, Eileen. Okay,
I think through procurement, that we look for the most sustainable and most circular products. And as a public service buyer, obviously we have an obligation to spend our money well and make our products last longer. If you buy products that are poor quality, you know, and last a year. And you buy, compared to products you buy that last maybe 5 years, you're immediately reducing your waste product. But also, the more you exercise your power in procurement and demand sustainable and circular products, I think industry will respond to that. That would be my view. And I think it's you know, it all starts with the first step of deciding that you want your products to be as circular as possible, because that fundamentally is the answer.
That's great, Eileen. Thank you. And that's clear. And I'm with you all the way. Maybe framing this slightly differently in terms of what one takeaway would you give to all the building operators or our facility management companies on the call here? What would you advise them to be considering or doing? And maybe if I can ask Claire to respond to that one.
I think the key thing is to focus on a few things and do them well, because the issue we have with net zero, and you just said that through the poll, that all of those can easily be tied into some form of fashion around net zero. So it's almost become the new word for sustainability. So my recommendation would be do assessment on your data and then drive your priority based on your impact. And if you see that as, you know, particularly around scope 1 and 2, then focus there. But what I would do is, if you focus somewhere where it is a strong impact, it's going to take a little while, do some of the quick wins to demonstrate progress, so that both your client, your suppliers and your colleagues that work with you can see that you're making progress. So it's not just around the commitment, there's also action in place. So you can't keep saying, oh, we're going to be doing this, because it takes investment, business case. We've done this and we're also looking to do that. So my big thing here is hone it down, be really clear and really focused, and take your colleagues on that journey with you. Otherwise you won't get to net zero, because you'll get stuck and it's too big, and where do we start?
Excellent, Claire. Like, measure first, and then measure your actions, measure where you are, and you can. I think this is an important point as well, coming from government, in terms of, we have all these targets, but we need to have them measured against something. So baselines, as people mentioned, be it 2017, 2018, 2019, become really important. Leslie, do you want to come in here in terms of maybe one thought on what do you think building operators should be focusing on or doing?
Yeah, I think what is really important fundamentally is cost, in terms of making sure we have a clear understanding of the cost implications, because, you know, often there's a, when you mention the word sustainability or net zero, and maybe people focus on one element of it but don't see the bigger picture. I think there needs to be a more coherent understanding, you know, of some of the expertise and barriers to this, and making sure that they're taking on board the full picture of the entire longevity of the design. You know, we are making decisions on a daily basis, and they're going to impact people's lives the next 50, 100 years. And it's making sure that we're making those decisions with that in mind, not just to hit an annual budget this year or next year. And that takes really buy-in from everyone from director level down to understand that, I would say.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Longevity is important for sure, and that vision. Maybe there's time for one more poll question to go up. And just as I'm going to, the last word will go to Ger Keys, who's posted a question, which is, any opinions on the importance of high quality air in buildings and what FMs are doing to address this? So question around air quality. Maybe, I don't know, I have my own views. It's really important, air quality, but I don't know, Dervla, from the agency's perspective, do you have a view on air quality and its importance in terms of buildings, be it commercial or not?
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously from a health point of view, clean air quality has become more and more important recently. But there's actually mounting evidence that a well-insulated, you know, well-controlled building will have cleaner air and better quality air as well. So I guess it's one of the benefits of you know, commercial retrofits or home energy upgrades, is that you'll generally have a better quality air in the home or in the premises. So I think, and that's one of the really important things I think about the actions that we need to take, is communicating that the benefits aren't just about reducing greenhouse gas emissions or from an energy point of view. It's also, your lifestyle, your health will be benefited as well. So I think it's important from that point of view.
Yeah, thanks, Dervla. I think just in terms of the final question, just before we close, which is around stakeholders, if people could respond, that would be great. And just as we're waiting, very quickly, so yeah, there we are. The which stakeholders are best placed to drive sustainability, and FM and property, capital project and estate directors. These are the ones that no pressure, Ken, on people like yourself, but you're in the firing line for the ones that are going to be best placed to make these real changes within organizations. I'd like to close the session here and pass it back over to Conor Cooney. But before I pass it over, I'd like to thank everyone for their active participation and very insightful views. The mixed sectors, but commonality in terms of purpose and in commonality in terms of net zero viewpoints and the actions that need to be required. So thank you very much for all your participation, and thanks everyone for tuning in to listen.
Thank you very much, Matt. And again, thanks to our panelists who there was quite a lot in that. I think it's overall got some really good feedback. Just to recap on a few of those items, I liked Sheila mentioned the shared challenge. I like that phrase because it is obviously shared between not just kind of FMs, but obviously globally, everybody in the globe. And it is a challenge. It's not a problem. It's something we can overcome. What popped out of there was it's very much being customer driven or student driven in some cases. We also need to look at waste, and I like the part about waste reduction actually, where we can look at further efficiencies in what we're doing, and the potential to bring in circular economies also around that. Scope 3 was definitely going to be a focus for many. Certainly more in the future, while scope 1 and 2 has been addressed for many of the organizations here, that we need to look kind of into the supply chain, which brings in our green or sustainable procurement. Certainly we've seen a kind of a significant lift in that over even the last 6 months or 12 months. And I understand the EPA has actually published some documents around that, and it's on their website. Also important to look at the whole life cost and not just the capital cost, and how we can bring that perhaps into a balanced scorecard when we're doing that sustainable procurement also. And I suppose also to understand that the application of this may not come cheap, but it's about looking at the long-term impact and how we can kind of have that kind of longer-term effect. I also like the part about how we need to translate what COP26 means to each organization. It is very discrete and I suppose specific to how we each address that. But I liked the response to the last poll, where the FMs and the estate directors and the capital directors and so on, they felt they were the person's best place to kind of drive this. So look, I think it's great that the people on here feel that we're in a good position to actually push this agenda forward and make a real change as part of this. On behalf of the committee, I suppose I'd like to thank Matt and each of the panelists, and my own committee obviously for bringing this together today. I hope you all got some benefit out of this. We'll send a recap message out on our LinkedIn, and on that basis I'd like to thank everybody and wish you all a good day. Thanks very much.